Hi there everyone, my name is Zach and welcome to my channel. Amongst other things, I'm a reenactor and a jouster, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the jousting in the first episode of House of the Dragon. Now, a few people have already done videos on this, and just like them, I'm going to put a little disclaimer at the front here. Obviously, you can't really criticise a fantasy show on the historical accuracy of it. Obviously I know that Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon isn't a real thing that actually happened. We know that George R.R. Martin has said that he's taken a lot of inspiration from European medieval history, particularly the Wars of the Roses, to help inspire his fantasy. But obviously it's not actually what actually happened. It's not a historical thing. However, there are certain things that just wouldn't work and don't work if we're going to assume a very similar medieval world. So I'm not going to be so much commenting on the accuracy of the jousting that's going on here, but rather how realistic it is. So first of all, the joust that's going on appears to be kind of a bit of a cross between what we would think of as a medieval joust, but also a Roman theatre, and there's definitely some inspiration from a Roman amphitheatre in the jousting arena that's been made for this particular episode. It's really cool to see how important everyone is showing the jousting to be. You know, everyone's out in their best robes. You've got all of the women of the court there as well. There's a lot of chivalry going on, which is really cool. Now, first of all, the first part that I saw was the main prince guy, Daemon Targaryen. I watched his joust and I was like, oh, that isn't really very chivalrous. It doesn't appear that. So I've spoken to a few people who have watched the whole show and kind of have read the books and things, and basically that is a story point. He's not meant to be being particularly chivalrous, so we're okay with that. But my question would be, what is the point of this tournament? Being a prince in the ruling household, it's very likely that he's actually going to be a commander of the army. And so having him be very brutal and unchivalrous to the knights that are going to be making up his army is possibly going to cause more problems than it actually solves. It may be that that is what happens in this series anyway. So I'm not going to mention it any more than that. Now, having a look at the jousting that's going on, it's very fast, it's very frenetic. So they don't really stop at either end. They grab a new lance and then they set off again. That's certainly something you can do. It can cause problems turning your horses on very short areas like that, but it is entirely possible. And as jousting is meant to prepare you for war, being able to do that is certainly a good thing. Most modern jousts, that from a competitive point of view, take a slightly slower approach, which does also seem to have been done in period as well. Down the middle of the tilt, you can see the fence here. Now, the fence is actually really quite low compared to a lot of the ones that you'll see used in historical jousting nowadays. The tilt rail was actually put in to stop people from damaging their horses, okay, to stop collisions, to stop the horses from meeting each other in the middle, and to stop low lance blows from striking at the horses. There isn't really much of a point to having a tilt rail that's this low. Obviously it means that the horses can't ram into each other, but it's not performing its full point being this low. You also see Damon leaning out across the tilt rail and tripping up his opponent's horse. This is what I really wasn't a big fan of. And obviously this has been put in by the filmmakers for us to go, oh, we're not too keen on him either. In film, if you ever see someone intentionally hurting an animal, that's the filmmaker going, this guy's a bad one. Why wouldn't that be done in period? Well, first of all, the point of jousting is to show lots of different things beyond just being able to knock someone off a horse onto the ground. If you're going to do something like that, you may as well throw down caltrops in front of them, because you're not playing by the rules. It's a foul. You're not striking the person, you're striking their horse, and you're tripping their horse up. But also, I don't know that it would actually work. The reason for that is, in order to actually trip a horse with your lance would have to be out that way, which means that you are going to be hit a lot sooner than you're actually going to trip up your opponent's horse, because their lance is out in front, as Damon did when he leaned across. He really leaned out of the saddle so he could reach over the tilt rail. His lance wasn't couched, he was just holding it in one hand. His lance is going to get wrenched out of his hand by the horse. He is going to get hit full on by the opponent's lance long before his lance goes anywhere near his opponent's horse. So really, this tactic, although it's telling a story as far as the director is concerned, from a jousting point of view, it's a really bad move, and it's not going to go down well. First of all, it's completely unchivalrous, which does seem to be an idea that they do have in the Game of Thrones universe. Secondly, it completely puts you in a very vulnerable position, because you're twisting, leaning out of your saddle, leaning over the tilt rail, and presenting a target to your opponent that they will be able to hit you far earlier than you will be able to do what you're planning on doing to their horse. And finally, the chances of you actually tripping up their horse are low, because you're holding your lance just with the strength of your hand. So it's actually more likely that your lance will get ripped out of your hand, or you'll end up with a broken wrist or broken arm. Speaking of broken wrists and broken arms, the riders here are absolutely excellent. Really great to watch from that point of view. You can tell they are stunt riders and stunt jousters rather than competitive jousters. This style of jousting doesn't use the lances in a historical way. The reason for that is they want as much movement as possible in the lance so that they can accurately target it much easier. Now, what that does mean is that there's less strength is imparted to the lance, because they hold the lance up like this and they're holding it in their hand, so then they've got all of the adjustment of the whole arm in order to adjust and hit when they're supposed to hit. It also allows them to hold the lance separate from the movement of the body. So when the body is moving up and down, the lance can stay more still. The problem with this style of jousting is that it doesn't impart as much of an impact to your opponent. So most of the strength of the impact of a jousting lance comes from it being couched properly underneath the armpit. So you clamp your armpit down over the lance and you adjust the targeting with your hand. This means that obviously the movement of your body will move the lance up and down a bit. That makes it harder to hit. But it imparts more strength. So what they're doing here in the filming of it is they're choosing a style which has less strength to it in order to improve the accuracy, which obviously you want to do because you want the guy to hit at the right time and you want the guy to miss at the right time. Now, what that means is all the people flying out of their saddles, there's no way that they would actually need to fly out of their saddles. They are not being hit that hard. If you are riding towards someone who is who has a good seat and is intending to stay in the saddle, and you are using the floating targeting style without a couch, then your wrist and thumb will break before you knock them out of the saddle. Your wrist and thumb are not as strong as their connection to their horse. Your strike is not going to knock them out of the saddle. So from that point of view, we're not really looking at an accurate form of jousting for what we're seeing. Having fallen out of the saddle as well, if the armor's made properly for you, then it shouldn't cause too much of a problem. A lot of these guys are falling out of the saddle and are really, rolling on the ground and moaning and that sort of thing. I have impacted the ground hard after a pass at Arundel International Tournament in 2019. My armor was good enough that I got up straight away and went to look for my opponent, and it turned out I'd knocked him out of the saddle as well. Doesn't happen very often. Generally, if you're hitting the ground, especially in a sand arena like what they have here, if you're hitting the ground in full plate armor that's made especially for you, as these guys seem to have, then you're not going to be in too much pain. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, Daemon Targaryen's armor. So most of the armor in this tournament is actually pretty accurate historically. It doesn't necessarily seem to be being worn correctly, and I can do a video on that at a later point, picking up on some fine details, because that might help a few of you as you're making and wearing your own armor. And it's the mistakes that I've seen they're ones that you see in reenactment a lot as well. But this armor is actually quite interesting, because the rest of them I kind of feel like might have been chosen from a prop store and maybe modified slightly, like for Thingamabob Hightower has got a tower on his helmet, so they probably modified that and made that specially for him. But for the most part, they've got quite standard 15th century style armor that they're using. The guy who asks for the favor of the lady is wearing a 16th century style armor, and then we see Daemon Targaryen in his fantasy, this is ridiculous, this armor. Actually, it is obviously quite ridiculous, but looking at it, it's clearly based on two different ideas of medieval fantasy armor. So you might not know this, in the medieval period, people actually had armors made that were fantasy armors. We see them, we do have examples from the 16th century that have existed, and that we think that it's very, very possible that there were some in the 15th century as well. Daemon Targaryen seems to have been created, it seems to be made from scratch, so it has been sculpted by the art department, but it seems to be based on some 16th century armors for the helmet, and I'll show some examples of those on the screen right now, and then a 15th century cuirass that has a slightly different style to it. This is a painting of St. Michael from the 15th century, and there have been several examples of this that have been made by armourers now, and we know that this would have worked. So it's possible that this armour that is painted so beautifully in this painting actually was a real armour that was made in the 15th century for maybe something like a tournament. What are the problems with this armour then? We know that armours like it did exist. What are the problems with it? So first of all, the throat and face are very, very unprotected. Now, this is something that you just can't get away from, even in a fantasy universe. The face needs to be protected in a joust. You can't not protect the face in a joust. And you might say, oh, but I want to be able to see that this is the main character. Well, he's got an armor that's completely different to everyone else's. What you need is him to come out wearing it, and then he puts his visor down or something like that, and then you know, oh, that's Daemon Targaryen. He's in that armor, but he's got the realism of having his face protected by a visor or by a raising buff. So in the 16th century, you also get kind of visors that come up from below and protect the face from below like that. So yeah, definitely you would never joust without face protection. You might say, but he's so foolhardy and strong that he doesn't care. He's just going to dodge out of the way or something like that. Usually you don't get to dodge when you're jousting. It happens so fast and you're concentrating on your own lance too much to actually dodge. Let's imagine as well that dodging is actually part of this rule set, which actually it doesn't seem to be part of it in the 15th century. Part of the aim of medieval jousting kind of seems to be able to deliver a hit as well as take a hit. So they don't really want you to dodge, they want you to take a solid hit and deliver a solid hit at the same time. But let's imagine that in this world, dodging is part of it as well. He's going to use his abilities as a rider and as a jouster to avoid being hit in the face. It's all well and good. If you can avoid the end of the lance, then fair play to you. But on my jousting armour, I have got loads and loads and loads of tiny scratches from splintered lances all over it. This is steel armour that has been made to withstand this this kind of thing. But just from the impact of the lance and it shattering, it's got tiny nicks and things like that from the splinters of the lance. You cannot dodge a cloud of splinters. So as much as he might be thinking, oh, I'm going to dodge it, you can't do that. His face is going to be a mess by the end of this tournament. Whether he's dodging the tips of the lances or not, his face is going to be all messed up. One last thing, when Hightower falls from his horse, you can see his helmet coming off, but you can also see the helmet strap. Now, this is something that I've seen a few people, including Shad from Shadiversity, has commented on this, how that would seem a bit strange that the strap might break. We have writings from the 15th century and the 14th century where jousters intentionally did not attach their helmets as well as they could. They either left them unlaced or left them slightly loose. And you might think, having just said all this stuff about the face, why would they do that? Obviously they're wearing the helmet for protection because the splinters are flying all over the place, but they're leaving them loose because one of the places where you can break a lance is on the eye slot of the helmet. That's one of the really good places to get a grip with the coronal. So the end of the lance hits the eye slot of the helmet, it breaks the lance, and then you're past. So even if the helmet comes off, the splinters have happened, and you're already past it. If you have a helmet that is looser, then it is harder for your opponent to get a decent hit onto your head and to break their lance from it. So we have people wearing a smaller helmet, like a bassinet, inside a great helm, and leaving the great helm loose, so that then when the lance comes in, it strikes the great helm moves back, the lance slides off, the opponent doesn't get the lance breaking. Now, the reason we know about this is because a lot of knights didn't like this happening. There were complaints about it. Some people thought it was unfair, and they asked the lords of the time to stop it from happening. In the end, it was decided that the risk reward was enough that they would let it continue to happen. So basically, they're saying, well, they're taking a risk here. It is dangerous. You still do run the risk of serious injury by leaving your helmet unattached in this way. So so we're going to let you do it. You know, you can choose risk reward, what you're going to do. So yeah, just a little extra thing there for those of you who were wondering about the helmet coming off of Sir Hightower. It is something that historically did happen. I'm sure that the filmmakers weren't particularly thinking about that when they made it, but there we go. Sometimes art can mimic life in unexpected ways. Thank you very much, guys, for coming along. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please do like, share, subscribe, all of those things. And hopefully I will see you in my next video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.